As you approach your ETL 805 and 806 classes and you're getting ready for your final research, I want to just go over some tips that will help you be a little more successful in your advisor approval form for ETL 805. So I'm just starting with the form that's typically used in ETL 805, and we're going to go through each component together. You'll complete your name and who your instructor is. If you're in special education, then I'm your advisor. The date of submission. Just be careful that you are allowing time for your instructor or your advisor to review this. So sometimes students will submit it on, say, a Friday when it's due to their ETL instructor on a Sunday, and that's just not possible for your advisor to get to that. So at least one full week before it's due to your ETL instructor. That gives me time to review it and give you feedback and for you to make changes before you submit. Your first section is the research problem. I want to go over the comments first. Typically the comments that I end up having to give for this section is that your research problem needs to establish that you've identified a problem and give some support for it through the literature. So first you're going to address your specific problem, and you'll do this in observable, measurable terms. You'll have to also look at where do you see this same problem in the literature, and you're going to cite some folks who agree with you. When you see this problem in the literature, in what ways is that problem like the problem that you experience in your classroom? And how did those researchers address it? And then you want to state clearly how you're going to do that in your setting. The research question needs to be pretty specific, and it also needs to be grounded in the current body of scholarship that's your topic or problem area. So just as a sample, this is an example one that I've come up with. I'm going to say that my research problem is about co-teaching. So I say, while co-teaching as a model of instruction has been recommended, the most recommended strategy for inclusion of children with disabilities in the general classroom, and you can see here I've established my topic, the literature suggests that lack of understanding and inconsistent implementation offers inconclusive evidence about co-teaching, and much of the literature points to a lack of understanding of how to implement those models. Now with this statement, I've identified the problem in the literature about my topic. So I've established my topic and connected it to the literature. I'm going to look now at my specific setting. At Winding Woods Middle School, this is where I teach, all core content teachers have at least one section that is co-taught, yet specific training or coaching is not offered to the co-teachers. Now I've identified the problem as it relates to my specific school setting. This research will investigate what strategies co-teachers currently implement, what training and support teachers need, and whether or not a specialized professional development and support group via social media will have any effect on the types of co-teaching strategies used or teachers' self-reported knowledge about co-teaching strategies. Now here, I've connected my very specific problem that co-teachers don't use multiple strategies and there's a lack of support or training or confidence to the literature, and I've identified a question that can be answered and is directly related. Now when we go down to our questions, we want to make sure that the questions that are not presented as generalizable questions or answers. Because I'm doing individualized classroom research, it's not generalizable, even if lots of folks may learn something valuable from it. You're looking at your students, so you need to be very specific about your setting. So let's look at my research question. What co-teaching strategies do teachers use consistently in their co-taught classroom? So I actually should change this to say, what co-teaching strategies do teachers at Winding Woods Middle School, let's see, these are going to be core content teachers. What co-teaching strategies do core content teachers at Winding Woods Middle School use consistently in their co-taught classrooms? Do current co-teacher practices in the classroom reflect the trends in the literature? That's what I'm looking to answer. So the literature suggests that there's only a couple of models being used by teachers and that teachers just don't have the training or support. So I want to look and see, is that true for my school? Now how will I collect this data? I'm going to collect some observation data first of all, and some lesson plan data to identify what strategies the teachers are actually using. But I'm also, before I start doing that, I'm going to give a brief survey prior to my observations to see what are the teacher perceptions of their co-teaching? That is, what kinds of strategies or varieties do my co-teachers think that they're using or say that they're using? And then I can look at their lesson plans and I can look at their actual teaching. I can do some observations to see what those are and if there are any differences. My second research question, why do the teachers at Winding Woods Middle School use the strategies they choose? So I'd like to look at using a questionnaire that asks teachers to identify the co-teaching strategies that they use, when was the last time they used that strategy and the type of lesson, and why they chose it. Now I'm asking them to identify their strategies, and that's their perception. Many teachers, in my experience, think that they use more strategies than they do, which is why I'm asking them to identify. If they say they used a strategy, if they say I use station teaching, then I want them to tell me, well, when was the last time you used it and what type of lesson was it? And that will help them narrow down what they'd like to use versus what they actually use. I'm also going to identify the strategies. It's possible that teachers may not know all of the 6 strategies for co-teaching as identified by Friend and Cook, and the most commonly used strategies. So I'm going to have to identify those in my questionnaire. And then if there are strategies that the teachers don't use at all, I can ask them to identify why they don't use it. And I'd like to have questions that have the option for a short answer or a comment in addition to some suggested response or multiple choice options, so that if I have a question about do you use a particular strategy, that they can, if there's some reasons why they don't. The reason I don't use the strategy is because my lesson plans aren't appropriate for this strategy. I don't have the support of a teacher in my bell all the time, just different kinds of things like that. And then my third question, will professional development and a social media support group have any effect on the variety of strategies for co-teaching that teachers at WWMS use? So this is really where my intervention comes into place. This is what my intervention is going to be. I have some suspicions about what I think is accurate or true about the teachers and the co-teaching in my school, and as a teacher there, I know that there's not this kind of support for them, so I'm suggesting that my intervention of providing a professional development based on what they say they need and creating a social media support group on Facebook where we can get together and talk and present our ideas might help. It might not help, but that's my opportunity to investigate. So I'm going to develop and deliver a professional development about using co-teaching strategies, and I'm going to create and administer a social media site, a Facebook support group for my fellow WWMS teachers. I'm going to encourage discussion, planning, and sharing of ideas through this site, and I'll collect data on this site through the number of likes, the number of views, and any comments that might come up on my Facebook group, and then I'll analyze the comments for any themes. When I get into this next section, I've got my definitions. I'm going to go ahead and define some terms. Co-teaching, I'm going to define this as it is in the literature, and I'm not going to use Wikipedia or just the first hit on my Google search. I'm going to look, if I use Google, I'm going to use Google Scholar, or I'm going to go to my EKU Libraries webpage, and I'm going to use the ProQuest search. So I'm going to define co-teaching here. We're talking about the least restrictive environment because co-teaching is the most commonly used strategy for inclusion. So I'm going to identify that, define it, what it is, and where it comes from in our laws. I'm going to identify inclusion, again, using the law definitions. I'm going to define professional development, and this comes from the Encyclopedia of Educational Leadership and Administration from SAGE. And then I'm also going to define social media because I'm using that as well, and you can see that I've still pulled my definition from a professional peer-reviewed journal. And then when you get to the bottom, once your advisor gives you an email that says, yes, you can go forward with this, you'll just copy and paste that here before you submit it to your ETL instructor. And then you do need to submit an IRB determination. Sometimes Lisa Royalty will send you an email that says you don't need IRB review. Other times she says, because you're dealing with protected populations, you do need IRB review. But either way, whatever she puts in her email, you put that here. Okay? So I hope that's helpful for you in terms of getting a sense of how to complete this form and what types of information is necessary or are necessary to successfully get this form. You should know that, that when you send this to me, I'll almost always send you comments back and ask you to make some clarifying changes. So please don't panic if you get it sent back to you. with corrections because it's likely to happen. And I view this very much as a conversation between you and me where we are discussing how you would do things. So you present some ideas and I will push back with some questions that are designed to get you to dig a little deeper each time. Okay, so thanks, and I hope that's helpful.